Hi everybody! I hope you're all having a good day. I hope you're all smiling and enjoying your lovely day. So in this following tutorial, I'm going to be teaching you guys basically how to do PMX editor morphs and basically just the overall, just teaching you guys the basics of morphs basically. Now, to start off though, I will mention that if by any chance you use VRM or Blender, and you're transitioning over to MMD and such, I will definitely mention this. There are vocabulary differences when it comes to MMD. For example, MMD calls it morphs, but Blender and other peeps, they use the term blend shapes and such. There's definitely, there can be that confusion, which even I'm also get confused when it comes to the whole morph versus blend shape when they really mean the same thing. But if by any chance you are very confused about vocabulary when it comes to just, in general, all this MMD stuff, I have made a Google MMD tutorial that goes over pretty much the basic terms and translations to sort of 3D industry terms to Blender or MMD terms basically. So please check that out if you can. But either way though, this tutorial will be specifically about PMX editor. I'll still mention some Blender stuff for those who want a better experience with creating morphs or blend shapes basically. But basically when it comes to PMX editor, I will say this, PMX editor is just mainly an editor basically. You can't really, technically you could make models from scratch, but it's primarily an editor, which is definitely, nice of the program. It's a non-commercial program, pretty simple to use. Can be complicated for some people, but, pretty overall simple. It's like a dumbed down version of Blender in a nutshell. But basically, when it comes to PMX editor morphs, it can be pretty simple. I'm going to say this, it can be complicated because I guess PMX editor with morphs, they're a little too simple that it makes it overcomplicated. So me personally, I'm going to mention this in case anyone wants a more easier way before I go over the hard way of these morphs. For me personally, I prefer using Blender. This is my current new model. What you saw is just an old version of my model. But basically, yeah, it's gonna look scary. Oh my god, wireframes. But, basically, pretty much every 3D model has wireframes, basically, in a nutshell. I'm also gonna close that. But basically, every model has wireframes. Even in PMX editor, your model has wireframe by just clicking on this button, and look at that. There are wireframes. Yes. They're in tries though, because PMX editor's engine and just MMD engine overall, I guess because since it's more real time basically, I guess it's kind of like how a game engine is sort of, it forces tries basically. However, with Blender we can have quads, but technically when you render in general, it will be translated to tries, but I'm not gonna go over in-depth Blender stuff in this tutorial, but I just wanted to go over this real quick. So when it comes to, I guess, morphs or blend shape creation, basically, I personally prefer making all my morphs in Blender because you can have a much better time, utilizing proportional tool edit, for example, this. And you can have a much better time making expressions, as you can see. Now, this is simple. I'm not going to go in depth with Blender, but I just wanted to at least show that, you can make stuff like a smile a lot more easier, basically, like that. You can also even utilize their sculpt brushes, which just gives a much more better time, honestly, when it comes to blend shape creation. So, yeah, I'm just, being super fast with this though, but basically you get my point that making morphs in, or blend shapes in Blender, for me personally, I have a much easier time with it because of the tools that Blender has. However, PMX editor does not offer those tools. At least to my knowledge, PMX editor do not have tools like that. They don't have a sculpt brush, they don't have proportional tool edit, none of that basically. I know, for example, they have a weight paint gradient, but they don't have any, anything that's select one point and then, you have a sort of proportional edit with it. For PMX editor, you're going to have to actually manually move each vertex, which is why I recommend having a low poly model. Basically, a low poly model is definitely, you know, the best thing, because at least you'll have a much better time moving the vertices around and such. If your model is way too high poly, like if you're a semi-realistic model or something, you're going to have a much harder time with it. So just be aware of that. If you are planning on making more morphs, if you want to have an easier way, you're going to have to learn a bit of Blender. It can be tedious, but it is recommended. Once you learn Blender, you might have a better time with it. But for PMX editor, it just depends. I had some people who actually prefer making morphs in PMX editor, and I sometimes question it, but yeah. But either way though, let's go over just starting off with basic morph creation. So to start off though, pretty much, you know, you can right click on any morph and you can have, you know, all these settings. You can save as CSV file, which basically is sort of like the vertex data that makes up your blend shapes or your morphs basically. You can copy and paste morphs and such. You know, there's a lot of other things. Me personally, I hardly ever use these settings, unless for special cases, but that's like 1% of the time, or probably 0.5%, so I hardly ever use these. But move up and down, you can, you know, adjust where your morph positions are for organization purposes. You can duplicate morph if you wish. If you, let's say, want to make it where, let's say your A blend shape right here, you want to have it where it has a cat mouse, like another version of it, you can definitely duplicate and do something like that. You can also even edit an existing morph as well. So if I were to right click on a morph, let's say A, I would click on vertex and UV morph edit. So you would right click on that, and basically you're going to have a subview. This subview is definitely really nice to kind of see the transition basically, which is really cool. And then here you'll see that, you know, with the model, it has the blend shape basically. Now, let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and turn off orthographic mode basically, but yeah, they're going to be moving at the same time. It's a secondary window, so don't be alarmed. But basically, for the most part, what you're going to do is, me personally, I would make sure to select the masking here. I would hit the R button to reverse to, you know, hide everything, and then I find the parts that I want to edit. So if it's like the mouse and let's say the face, and I want to have that edited, we can do that. And then make sure that you have the vertices, the show vertices buttons here selected. And then what I also do as well is I click on the front option, so that way I don't select vertices behind on accident. So I select the front option to make sure, you know, all is good. And then you can go ahead and take your time selecting. Once again, this is very tedious. I don't like this, but you can do this if you want. Take your time moving each vertice to how you want it. I still question why PMX editor still has this, but yeah. There's also the symmetry tool as well, by the way, which is located here. Honestly, a lot of times, PMX editor sucks at mirroring. I sometimes don't understand why, but a lot of times, in my experience, I always had where even with my model, like a from scratch model, and I put it to PMX editor, it will have times where basically the mirroring will just break still, and it really confuses me. So you can have it, you can enable it, but sometimes it just won't work. I believe there's a force mirror option, which I believe it's somewhere, yeah, like in object mode, but it's like, that's really unnecessary. It depends on the object, of course, like say hair, for example, but something like complicated, like a face, for example, may not, it's just not recommended, I guess. Just really depends. But I personally don't use it, but you may find it interested. But either way, you can also play with the other settings as well, like move, rotation, scale, and all that. But either way, those are some basic stuff. You can also play around with the edit tool as well. You can initialize the edit, basically meaning restart the edit, set to original position if you want to, you know, reset it. But for my case, you know, this isn't like a new morph basically. These have already been existing. but usually I would use that option if I'm making like a morph from scratch. But anyways, there's also mirror edit here as well, but at the same time I don't really use mirror edits because I make my morph blend shapes in Blender. But yeah, there's other stuff as well. There's even offset normalize, which I never use that. But yeah, there's also the cool thing too, where it's called vertex count. It shows you how many vertices are being used. Not really super important. Maybe for certain programs, let's say for example, if you're taking an MMD model to start Filmmaker, that could be, you know, something you may want to know. But me personally, I don't worry about it, but it's still interesting to see it though. And then in case you're wondering about threshold, usually I would just set it to 0. A lot of times I honestly don't really know. Even when I set the threshold very high, I hardly even see a difference with my models. So I usually set it to 0, but really up to you. You don't even have to touch it, but I set it to 0 personally. But either way, there's also these buttons here and such. You know, it's the same thing as the slider. And you can also set up the panel here as well, setting up which part the morph belongs to. So either the eyebrows, the eyes, the lips, or other, which is basically undefined. I set mine to lip. And then I also set the name to whatever it is, whether it's A or just the Japanese symbol for A, basically. And this is just pretty much for editing the morphs. You can also swap over to new morph if you wish, which will basically reset your face and allows you to create a new morph, for instance. So I can go ahead and make a new morph right now, like a simple one, like let's say nose up, for instance. Like we just want the nose to move up, like a scrunch nose, like that. Something simple. Just something simple to start off with. Basically, you know, once you have that pretty much, you just click on the reflect button. You have to make sure to select it so that way the vertex count will be included. Because if by any chance you just, let's say, move this cheek, right? And you're just moving it, the slider, you're going to see that it's not reflecting the cheek movement that you did. So make sure you click on reflect so that way it's registered. And yeah, pretty much in a nutshell, you can just set this as nose up. There's also, you can even set up UV morphs here as well. I personally use UV morphs, at least for this model in particular. For this model, I use bones. But originally, its older model, the older version that was pretty much unreleased, or at least you know, I never showed it. I don't even know why I said the word release. But basically, there was an old version of this model that actually utilized the UV morphs, but I got rid of it. But I can quickly show you how to do that. But before we get to UV stuff, basically what we're going to do is we're going to click on append, and basically it will allow us to add a new morph basically. So give PMX editor some time to add the morph, and you're going to see that there is a new morph right here. I've set it to lip, but you can always change it here to other if you wish, and boom, it's fixed. And pretty much in a nutshell, that's just vertex based morphs. If you want something like let's say, I'm gonna go ahead and exit, but let's say for example you want something like UV eyes, for example, in MMD, which I don't fully recommend, depending, because pretty much when it comes to generic MMD motions, they never utilize the UV eyes. So please keep that in mind. However, you can utilize it if you are going to be self-animating. So just keep that in mind, basically. But yeah, so let's just say, for example, now the way, like I said, the way these eyes structure, it's confusing. Please don't mind this model. I don't use this model anymore. It's dead to me. But I just want to show this as an example of UV eyes. So we have this model here. I'm gonna hold control so the freaking thing don't freak out. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna do right click on new, and you know, you're gonna go ahead and click on vertex UV if you're going to make UV. And what you're going to do is you are going to create a new morph. You're going to select the type being UV based. We're going to call this look up, for example. Set this to other. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to actually utilize the object editor here. And you're going to go into the UV tab here. And you're going to utilize these settings to adjust the UVs, basically. So you can see, for example, you know, when I slide, I have to click and drag to make this happen. And I'm moving my mouse left to right. And basically you can see that the eyes are moving. Once again, this is, not a lot of people tend to use this, UV eyes. This could also be used for not just eyes, it could also be used for like outfits, or even, let's say for example, you have a void model and you have, let's say, the blush, the face the face shadow texture and other stuff, and you have them kind of like the technique that, you know, you have the big texture, the big face texture, and they have all the 4 different faces, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah, pretty much. That what you did with that sort of effect, or if I'm making sense with this of what I'm saying basically. But basically though, when you do the whole UV sliding thing of those expressions, yes, you could do that as well. This is pretty much its equivalent basically. But pretty much though, yeah, you can see here, you have to make sure to click on reflect. And you can see that the UV eyes are working basically. And pretty much, you know, once you have your UV stuff, you can do scaling as well. It will also be reflected, but that is not something I want, so I'm going to do that. And pretty much you're going to just do a pen, say yes, and boom chakalaka, you just got another new morph. And it's going to be blue instead. That's, you know, being UV. Do remember that UV eyes cannot be exported into programs like Blender or Unity and such. Maybe to a certain degree Unity, but it's probably gonna break. Maybe I haven't used MMD Mecanum in a long time. MMD Mecanum is the main Unity plugin to put MMD models into Unity basically, but for the most part UV eyes don't really get translated well or at all. So if you're doing stuff like VRM, you know, VRM has their own UV eye stuff that you can do, and you know, MMD has its own thing basically, and Blender also has their own thing. Every program has their own way of doing UV stuff. Just wanted to clarify that, or just UV blend shape and controls. But either way, that's pretty much just UV eyes, or just UV morphs in general. They're pretty powerful, but it just really depends on your model and how you want to use it. Now, the other thing as well is the bone morphs, which pretty much, it's not like how, you know, you had the pop-up and such. This is going to be done a little differently, and this is where you're probably going to need MMD for this. So, I just want to show you how it looks like. So, for example, we can go to transform view, right? And I'm going to show you my morphs, basically. So, you'll see my model here, right? And we're going to go all the way down to my bone. Let's say we want to make my model into a T-pose, right? We're going to select this slider here, and boom, I have a bone slider for T-pose, basically. And technically this could translate to other models as well, as long as they have the same bone names, but either way, I have bone morphs here, and I even have the extra, in case you're wondering what these extra bone morphs are for. These are for the breathing add-on I have. I made a tutorial regarding how to make these, or how to prep these up and such. It's that auto breathing tutorial I made. But either way, and there's even an add-on that goes over how to do the whole IK thing. I believe I have the IKs? Yes, I do. Basically, there's this one as well, which I would have to enable the physics for. And boom, there's the IK that moves the skirt, basically. Maybe I might make my own tutorial on that, but honestly, there is already a tutorial about that if you're curious. But either way, though, there are bone morphs that you can do. how do you use them? Basically, what you're going to do is when you create a new bone morph, you're going to click on the add button here, and basically you're going to input what is the bone number, and then you're going to input the value. Yes, this might be a bit tricky, but like I said, this is where we're going to probably require MMD to help us out. That way to help you visualize the numbers basically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and load my models, which I will be right back. And once you have your model loaded into MMD, basically, what we want to do is we want to basically set our model to whatever pose we want. So let's say we're going to do a simple T-pose. Now, personally, I don't recommend making complex poses with your morphs, as it is really unnecessary. So for example, if you're going to make like a crazy cross-sitting pose with other stuff, I don't recommend doing that. I rather would just say you might as well just do all that in MMD and then just save it as a VPD file, which is the pose data file. If you plan on doing complicated stuff, the only reason why I would use bone morphs is if I'm using it on the breathing add-on I have, which once again I have a tutorial on how you add it. If I'm doing it for like the skirt IKs, which there's an add-on that automatically does that for you. Or if you just want to have a simple A pose, T pose for certain motions, which usually they don't really work that well. It acts weird, but to each their own. But either way, pretty much, let's say, you know, we want to make a T-pose morph basically to start off with. So what you're going to do is, you know, pose the arms here to however you want, you know, T-pose. And what we're going to do is look down here at bone place, and basically we're going to look at the angle. The angle for the Z-axis is set to 35.3, and what we're going to do is we're going to copy that number. We're going to go to PMX editor, and you're basically, right here, this is movement, which these are movement, and then this is angle. So basically just look at it and just copy the number. So in the instance of the axis, it's going to go here. It even tells you this one's X, this one's Y, this one's Z, and same thing goes here, X, Y, Z. And pretty much, you know, once you have that number there, you're going to go ahead and hunt down the bone name, which for my bone name, it's down here. It is number 24, which is left arm. So we're going to go to morph. We're going to set this to 24, which I am aware that this is the wrong bone. This is right, but I'm just wanting to show you that basically you find the number that you want and, you know, look, find the angle, you're good. Then you can add another bone. Let's find this one's name, which is that the right arm. So it's going to be 94, the right arm. So 94 for my case, not your model. Your model is going to be different. Your model might have the number 10 or 20 on the arms, or maybe 300 on the arms. So please keep in mind, don't copy the numbers piece by piece. Your model is different from mine. I just wanted to elaborate that. But this one is 94 for my model. And I'm going to go ahead and put in the same number. For the left arm, just making sure the left arm is set to negative 35.5, and then this one is positive value. So pretty much, that in a nutshell is pretty much how you set it up. And make sure you double check to make sure it's all good. If there's something wrong, you might want to change it. I'm also going to set this to 0 so it stops freaking out. But basically, we're going to go here, look at new morph, set this to 1, and as we can see, it does it pretty much did an A pose or H pose rather than a T pose. So if that's incorrect, then we switch the values over, which I'm going to do that right now and see if that helps. And there you go. See? Fixing. And that's pretty much in a nutshell, that's bone morphs, basically. And pretty much there's impulse as well. I do not ever use impulse at all. There's there are usages for impulse, but I never use it. I'm not gonna really cover over it. But pretty much in a nutshell, it's kind of like another way of like controlling the bones and such, basically. But yeah, it's just quite a bit unnecessary, but you know, if you want to utilize it and have a little bit more control with bone stuff, you can, but that's kind of unnecessary. There's also material morphs as well, which is definitely commonly used. So let's say, for example, you want to have, let's say, I want to make a wing toggle where instead of my wings always being there, I want my wings to turn off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to material, hunt down the material name for wings, for example, or hair, or dress, or whatever it is. Find the material that it corresponds to. So if I'm looking for wing, for example, it would be number 27. So I'm going to have a slot, click on the plus button, select the slot here, put this as 27. And basically you're going to click on this and you're going to click on edit morph. And basically you can have control on whether the offset is multiply or add, or you can set them all to 1 to appear or 0 to disappear, basically. And let's go ahead and see, you can even reset as well, or just set manually where if you want the outline to be large, or you want the opacity to be 0 or something like that. Let's go ahead and actually see what happens when we set this to a peg to 0, and we leave it as multiply. Let's take a look, shall we? So we're going to go here, and we're going to see what happens, basically. And as you can see, my wings disappeared. They're gone. They don't exist anymore. I'm no snow angel anymore. But either way, though, my wings are gone, basically. You can also set, once again, it really just depends on the effect you're going for. Sometimes there could be reasons to use multiply and some reasons to have add. But for the case of the wings, though, it's going to actually make them white, basically, which is actually a really, really nice effect. But if I just wanted them to go away, then multiply. There are certain cases where I would use add, and in certain cases where I use multiply. It just depends on the effect you're going for. But definitely play around with the settings, though, and see which suits you well. But hopefully that gives you at least like some basic knowledge on material morphs, basically. And last but not least, there's the flip morph and the group. The flip ones I never use, basically. Pretty much, it's in its name, it flips, but I personally just never use it. But basically, group morphs are typically common when it comes to converting a VRM model to PMX format if you're going to be mixing multiple morphs that are pre-existing. This is actually really useful if you want to combine different morphs and you want to save your time with making new morphs, basically. So pretty much all you have to do is, so basically when it comes to group morphs, basically pretty much you can click on the slot here and you will have to look into the morph name, basically. So for instance, let's say we want to have it where our eyes are, our eyes are closed, but we want to have it where our mouth is open. So we can go at another slot, we can type in 102, and we're going to go into transform view, and we're going to basically look into the mouth, basically. And we're going to go ahead and turn it to 1. And you can see it works, basically. You could do this with pretty much any sort of combination depending on what you want. I personally don't use it pretty much because I make all my morphs, vertex based and already done in Blender. But if for your case you want to make it more convenient for you and you want to do mixing a lot more easier, you can do that. Please keep in mind that UV, bone, material, and group morphs, they cannot be converted into Blender. They cannot be converted properly into Unity. Unity, once again, to a certain degree, but if you're going to convert an MMD model to VRM, for instance, it's not going to be converted properly. You're going to have to sort of retranslate it, basically. So please keep that in mind, that these are not going to be easily translated to other programs. It's the vertex blend shape that will be easily translated. But once again, it shouldn't mean that you shouldn't use these. They are pretty powerful, and if you're going to use MMD a lot, I definitely recommend taking advantage of, all the morph types. But pretty much, Impulse and Flip, I never use them. I've seen other models have used Impulse or Flip before, but for me personally, I don't personally really use them at all, nor do I care much about them. It's primarily I use Vertex, Bone, Material, or Group. Group I don't use as much, but Material, Bone, and Vertex I tend to use a lot, basically. And yeah, pretty much in a nutshell. But try to keep it, you know, no more than 255, which I'll delete those keys. But either way, though, just also make sure that, as well, that if you are going to be making new morphs, that you make sure to register them. So, basically, you know, you click on the facials here, and click on morph, click here, and press on the add button to add them. That way, when you do put them all into MMD, you can register the keyframe. But just remember, 255 is your pretty much limit for MMD stuff, or at least the morph count. I could be wrong about this, but just wanted to put that out there, basically. And also make sure you do the same thing with your bones. If you see any bones that you have to register, please make sure to add them. Very important, so that way your MMD motions can be registered properly, and also you can actually be able to, if you want to do some hand animation with MMD, you can also have an easier time doing that. But either way, though, that pretty much covers at least the display when it comes to the morph stuff. That should hopefully cover the basics of morphs, like how to sort of create them and such. Once again, when it comes to Vertex stuff, yes, you can create it with just going, you know, either editing by right-clicking, going to Morph Edit, or making a new one by clicking Vertex and manually edit the, you know, the vertices. But I just personally use Blender because it's just much more easier to make the morphs with the sculpt brushes, which, in case you're curious about putting an MMD model into Blender, just use the MMD Blender add-on, which I will link in the description so you can download it. You can easily import your MMD model, make edits, and then export it back into the PMX format the same way it is. You know, it's because the way that the MMD Blender add-on, it translates really well to make sure that your model goes back to PMX editor safely without any brokenness, basically. So highly recommend that add-on if you want to have a more easier time. If by any chance, I might, maybe down the line, maybe I'll make sort of like an additional part of this tutorial where I go over making morphs with Blender and then putting the MMD model into Blender and then putting it back. We'll think about that, but either way, I hope this tutorial helps you out understanding morphs and just basically in a nutshell what they are and just all that pretty much. Please let me know if by any chance you need any more help or if this tutorial confuses you or anything like that. Let me know feedback-wise. And let me know if you have any suggestions on any tutorials, like if I have to elaborate, let's say for example, I have to elaborate more about how to create, you know, the Blender blend shape morph for, you know, MMD stuff, basically. You know, I can do that. If you want a tutorial about rigidizing joints where you make them from scratch, I could do that. Or we're not gonna talk about soft bites. I know how to make soft bite, but no. But yeah, just let me know if you have any recommendation on a tutorial or anything. I'll leave my socials down below. So if you need to contact me for anything else, you know, I'm there. But overall, I hope that this helps you out. Have a lovely day, everyone. I'll see you guys next time. Hika, 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 sayonara, everyone. I hope to see you guys next time, okay? Bye-bye!